we explore human sexuality through education, science, and open, respectful conversation. And today I have my special guest. She's sex and intimacy educator and coach, and of course, best-selling author, no other than Maeve Zane Palette.
Hello, Daniel. Nice to see you again.
Yes, welcome back to one of my podcasts. Once again, Ms. Zane, can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Yes, of course. So I'm a sex and educator. I'm hearing music in the background.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It will be finished later.
Okay, perfect. I'm a sex and intimacy educator and coach, and have came to do this work. I've been doing it for the last 15 years, from having lived in a sexless marriage for over 2 decades. So I really have the lived experience of what it's like to be really sexually shut down and repressed, and disconnected from my own body and my sexuality and any intimacy with a partner. And for the last 15 years, I have been working with individuals, and in the last 7 years, primarily couples, particularly those who are really struggling around sexuality, who have maybe are living in sexless marriages, who are struggling with desire and attraction, and helping them learn how to reconnect, how to reignite passion and intimacy in their relationships.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Ms. Sunday, thank you. And today let's talk about why desire disappear in a long-term relationships and how couples can bring it back. So let's start by reframing the problem. Is it the desire disappear or does it often change form in a long-term relationship and we mistake that transformation for loss?
Yes, I think that's a great question. So there are three stages of relationships, of long-term relationships, right? The first stage is really what we call the new relationship energy stage. And that is when all of the hormones are surging because you're just falling in love. And this is actually happening in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's Mother Nature's way of making sure that procreation happens. But that is a short-term limited time. It is like 6 to 18 months at the longest, right? And then very often couples begin to feel that things start to shift after 18 months. Like I hear that all the time. And that kind of makes sense because, we then move into a phase of the relationship, which we call the validation phase, where we're maybe continuing to have sex with our partner, but we're doing it in order to validate that they still love us, that they still care for us, that we may be having sex out of obligation because as the relationship progresses and things start to shift, we feel like we're afraid of using them. And that validation stage is really the stage where I find couples tend to really lose that desire. They lose that spark. They're like, oh, like I'm not wanting you as much. I'm not as horny as I used to be. I may not feeling as attracted to you. I'm not thinking about sex as much. And sex starts to become, if you will, more of a chore, more of a routine. And that spark is just absolutely missing. And many couples stay in that phase for their entire relationship or marriage, which is really unfortunate because it tends to be a fairly, I want to say, shallow phase, Daniel,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not really deeply connected to your partner and maybe you're having sex, every once in a while, but the desire starts to wane. So that is an issue. And another piece that shows up, and this is also very true as particularly as couples grow together, we get bored. We keep on
Yes.
doing, right, we keep on doing the same
Mm-hmm.
thing over and over again. We're in a routine, it works, we'll just keep on doing it. And boredom and lack of variety
Mm-hmm.
is one of the things that really spoils desire. because, and this is especially true for women. So for all the guys that are listening to this, right? Women in particular get bored very, very easily. We need a lot of excitement. We need a lot of different change, different things happening. And it could be something small. It
True.
could be something just as small as like, instead of having sex in the bedroom, we're going to have sex in the living room or the bathroom or the kitchen. Right? um, but
True.
literally, right, doing something different changes up the dynamic and takes away some of that boredom. So I think that boredom is one of the reasons that we lose desire. Not that we don't love our partners, but it's just not as exciting anymore. Another reason that we lose desire, particularly in this validation stage of relationship, is stress, right? Like everybody is under so much stress, and we know that stress is one of the biggest desire killers for both women and men. It makes it very hard. And then there's also physiological changes that are actually happening, particularly for women. As we grow older, our hormones start dropping. And so the spontaneous desire that we used to have when we were in our 20s, right? And all the hormones were surging actually really goes down. And our desire switches more to what we call responsive desire. And a lot of women don't understand that, and their partners don't understand that either. It's kind of like, the "Just Do It" Nike commercial, right? Like as your body starts getting touched, or maybe your partner starts saying something that's sexy to you, your arousal starts to respond to outside stimulation. It's less internal. Women as they age, they tend to get less horny. It's just the way it is because our estrogen levels are dropping so much. And so understanding that that's what it feels like for a lot of women, like, oh, I really don't feel like I want to have sex anymore. But if my partner bites me on the neck or touches me in a way that feels good or starts making out with me, then all of a sudden my desire begins to come back as that arousal pathway starts. So really understanding that there are physiological changes that happen as well. And I think the fourth piece of this is also around we lose desire for sex when we're not feeling emotionally connected to our partner, when we don't feel seen, when we don't feel heard, when there's a lot of built up resentments, when we don't repair conflict, which is why I wrote this book, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit, and my major message there is like the way to maintain a healthy relationship is to learn how to repair conflict, because that creates the deep emotional connection and intimacy. And that happens really easily in long-term relationships because of all of the ways in which conflict shows up in romantic relationships, right? So I think those are like the four main reasons why we lose desire. Does that make sense?
So we often hear about roommate syndrome. What is the less obvious early warning signs that a couple is sliding from a romantic partnership into managerial co-parenthood or a business partnership?
Yeah. I think that is very, very common. And I think the first early warning sign is that mm, maybe you've stopped really communicating around sex and you're starting to notice that there's less intimacy in the relationship, maybe less sex, less touching, less cuddling, less kissing, right? And again, all relationships go through stages. We have ups and downs. So, there are times when there's high levels of stress where maybe there isn't as much of that. But if that continues for like 5 months, 6 months, and also if there's no like extenuating circumstances, it's not like you just had a new baby, then I think that's one of the beginning early warning signs that you may be shifting more into roommates rather than lovers.
Certainly. From a psychological or neurological perspective, Ms. A, how does the very safety and security we crave in a long term partner can sometimes act as super sand to raw desire?
I'm sorry, I didn't. And tell me again the end of that last question. How it.
Yes, long term partner can sometimes act as a suppressant to raw
Oh,
desire.
as a suppressant. Well, okay, so this goes to the desire and wanting to be excited, right? So and this is, this is the opportunity, right, to shift from this validation stage of sex into what I call the passionate intimacy stage of sex. Because I think what we begin to feel is like, oh, yeah, I know this person. They're kind of like, they're a good slipper that I put on my foot. They're comfortable, but they're not sexy, and I'm not as attracted to them anymore. Especially if you feel very close to your partner and there's a lot of emotional connection. It's really important to learn how to drop into that passionate intimacy stage. And to drop into that passionate intimacy stage, you really need to look at sex as less of a mechanical thing. Again, this is a lot of what happens in validation sex. It's very genitally oriented, right? It's very like outcome based, outcome oriented, and move more into like, how do we think about having these two bodies that get to have a lot of pleasure with each other without any expectations, without any goals, and just really be present in the moment and really slow things down and get curious about different ways in which we can interact with each other, different types of styles of sex that we might have together. Maybe it's time for us to start exploring more energetic sex, like more Tantra, for example. Or maybe it's time for us to start exploring a little bit more light BDSM or light kink. But doing it in a very conscious, thoughtful way where the focus is on pleasure and connection and not on goals and expectations. That really takes your, where these comfy little roommates that have sex the same way all the time, and it's really starting to get boring, to a whole new level of enjoyment and excitement and curiosity and exploration.
Very well said, Ms. Zanay. So, can you distinguish between a loss of a spontaneous desire, the I want it now feeling, and the potential to responsive desire that I get into it once we start feeling in established couples?
Yeah. So the difference is, this is not 100% true, but because I've seen it in both ways, but typically, men tend to have more of that spontaneous desire because they have been more, they're more connected to their desire. They're more connected, if you will, to their sexuality, just because like you literally wear your arousal network on the outside of your body, right? Your penis, your testicles are on the outside of your body. You have access to it all the time. And for women, our arousal equipment is much, much more internal. So that's one of the reasons that desire is so different, that you are really conditioned and socialized to it much more than women are. And again, in long-term couples, and this really mostly has to do with as they get older, women begin to lose that spontaneous desire as their hormone levels, particularly their estrogen and testosterone levels, begin to drop, which starts to happen around their mid 30s. Like we actually know now that hormone levels for women in perimenopause, pre-perimenopause, starts really in their mid 30s, quite earlier than we used to think. And so there's a relatively short window there for that spontaneous desire to really be very alive. But again, that does not mean that your partner doesn't want sex. And this is an important message for the women out there too, right? Because I think it's also women's responsibility to initiate sex, even if they may feel like they don't have any desire, because otherwise it's always going to be on the male partner or the higher desire partner's responsibility to constantly initiate. And that's not fair either. So I always tell my women who are in their, as they're starting to age, like, that when your partner starts touching you, like you're going to get in the mood, most of the time. So it's incumbent upon you to also initiate sex equally because, it starts feeling good after you start doing it. And that's important because otherwise, one partner just keeps on feeling rejected. And I will say, and I do have many, several couples that are like this, it can be reversed. It's not that uncommon for in a hetero couple for the women to have the higher desire and the man to have lower desire, and the same things are going on. They actually need more responsive desire. So it's not, there's definitely some gray here. It's definitely not black and white.
Interesting, Ms. Danae. So let's talk about the core dynamics or intimacy versus desire. Esther Perel famously talks about the tension between the need for security and the need for adventure. In
Mhm.
practical terms, how does too much fusion, knowing everything about each other, drain the erotic charge?
I mean, it definitely can drain the erotic charge. That's why it's really incumbent upon couples to really understand, first of all, what are their core, what we call core desires? What are the emotions that they want to feel when they're having sex? And this is very different than this is very different than the sensations that they want to have. Oh, I want to feel bliss. I want to feel an orgasm. That is very different than the emotions that you want to feel. And these emotions, or what we call these core desires, they actually relate back to childhood and specifically to childhood wounds, right? And so, if you are able to repair that childhood wound, for example, if you were a child that was very controlled by your parent, like you really had very little freedom, right? A core desire for you might be to like be totally out there and try also be very adventuresome and try lots of different things. And that's very exciting for you because it repairs that wound. It is a, it creates the missing experience that you didn't have. Alternatively, it could also be that your core desire is actually about repetition with agency. So if you were a child that was heavily controlled, it might be that your turn on here, when I say a core desire, I'm talking about a turn on, that your turn on is actually to be very submissive and controlled by your partner. But you're playing that out with agency rather than being forced by a parent to be very controlled. So when we can tap into these core desires that we have, the feelings that we want to have during sex, and we can figure that out and communicate that really well with our partners and begin to play some of that out, sex becomes a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting, and actually satisfies that deep desire that you have inside. I don't know if that's how Esther Perel would answer it, right? Like we talk a lot about, having separation, right? Like, fondness makes the heart grow. What was it? Separation, distance makes the heart grow fonder, right? Like taking some time away from your partner, and then it's kind of exciting when you come back, or doing some role playing. Like all of that is a part of it. But I feel like the really important part is really understanding the emotions that you want to have during sex and playing that out. And that more than anything will really increase desire at any stage in any age of life.
So let's talk about your two books, Ms. Danae. Living as orgasmic life. What is it all about?
Living an Orgasmic Life is a book that is geared mostly towards women around how to acknowledge and see like blocks that you have around your sexuality and then how to overcome that. It is very much part autobiographical. So I've weaved my own story of sexual awakening and healing into this, as well as a lot of different case studies. And it talks a lot about my journey in Tantra and sacred sexuality. And then my other book, which is coming out on, I think, March 24th, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit, is a book that is geared towards couples who are having challenges around sexuality, who are living in a sexless marriage, who are having issues around desire and attraction to their partner. And the Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit really helps us focus on what are the foundational elements to create a great sexual relationship. And the foundational elements are really around intimacy, around the emotional connection, around feeling, understanding what it's like to be attuned to or misattuned to, about empathetic listening, and about learning how to repair conflicts. And then I've identified, I think, 3 seminal aspects of sexuality that couples need to embrace in order to have a really delicious sex life, which is, redefining what sex looks like, understanding core desires, which we just talked about, and then understanding different sexual styles and erotic blueprints, because that has an impact on how you want to have sex. And it also relates to core desires, and then how to integrate different sexual styles between you and your partner.
Well, thank you for sharing to the world, Mazane. So let's talk about our main topic. How do daily necessary acts of caregiving erode the perception of our partner as sensual, separate individual?
Well, I think that, you know, I think that a lot of couples get into a sort of codependent space, which is also problematic for a lot of reasons. And being able to maintain, to both be, I guess I would say the goal would be interdependency, not codependency. Um, Not total. I mean, individuation is very important. You need to be your own person. I feel like people need to have their own hobbies and some of their own interests and their own friends. Like, that just makes for a much healthier lifestyle for everyone. Not to say there wouldn't be, places where there's overlap. But we need to be interdependent. And that, by that, I mean that, you know, it's not, you don't have to leave it up to your partner. Like, you can help, you need to help and support your partner and nurture them as well. Sometimes we need to be the parent figure for our partner when they're in a childlike state, right? And understand that that's actually a healthy dynamic, right? It's not a codependent dynamic to be that caregiver, to be that nurturer. Not all the time, but when it's necessary. If we overdo that, and we do see that sometimes, right? Like, if I'm constantly nurturing you and taking care of you and nagging you, then I feel like your mother, right? And you don't want to have sex with your mother, right? That's actually, a huge turnoff. So being able to balance, like, how much caregiving, how much nurturing to provide to your partner, but also do that in a boundaried space, making sure that there's good individuation for each of you, and being able to drop that when it's not necessary. Those are challenging dynamics that couples often have to play out in the context of relationship, and they often need somebody to point that out to them, like, wow, it sounds like she's trying to mother you. That must not feel very good for you. That must not be a turn on for you. Yeah, it's not a turn on for me at all.
Thank you for that empowering answer, Ms. Zane. So let's address the tough reality. Sometimes the disappearance of desire points to deeper relational injury or incompatibility. When is this not just a phase, but a signal that professional help is needed?
Yeah, I think the lack of that is definitely true, and sometimes it's not a phase. I would say when there's a lot of conflict in a relationship outside of sex, right? Usually, when there's challenges with in a sex life, the the challenges in your sex life are really symptomatic of deeper relationship issues. So if you're fighting a lot with your partner, if there's a lot of conflict, if you're building up a lot of resentment and anger, that's a really good sign that it's time to get professional help, because those type of things don't go away by themselves. Those actually need support from an objective professional who can give you tools and skills to learn how to repair conflict, how to resolve issues, and how to feel more emotionally safe and emotionally connected in the relationship itself.
Said, very well said, Ms. Danae. But before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course my book 101 review in sixth season too, comedy 101 in third season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 in fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101, in a fourth season, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, my Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcast. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Ms. Zane, if we let go of a Hollywood model of perpetual, effortless passion, what does a realistic, sustainable, and deeply satisfying ecology of desire look like for a couple's decades in?
Yeah, I mean, it does, like you said, it doesn't look like, fireworks exploding all the time. Sometimes it looks slow and calm. Sometimes it looks deeply, exciting. Sometimes it looks very adventuresome. It looks like lots of different ways in which you connect with your partner, and making that a priority, that you're constantly getting curious and exploring new ways to create connection and passion.
Yes, and Ms. Zane, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Yes, you can find my books on Amazon, as you can see up here, and you can contact me at my website, which is Passionate Intimacy Retreats with an S.com. PassionateIntimacyRetreats.com.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Zane Pilot, because if you support her for sure, more and more empowering books like this to rise. So, Miss Zane, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, hoping for. Please do come over and over and over. Let's talk about something good on Sex 101. Now, more to come, people. See you soon.